Week number 8, Sharpening the Edge, the podcast that gets you ahead in the world of handicapping. At least it did last week if you were listening to us. And, that's our aim every week. Lucas Reimink, Dennis Fithian. Lucas, how are you doing here as we sharpen the edge for week 8?
Doing pretty well. 31, 26, and 2 on the season now. Not where I want to be. I'd like to be a little better, but over 500, so I'll definitely take that. Hopefully it's another good week of games. We got a lot of interesting games going on this weekend, so excited to watch it. Let's get to it.
I had a good week that would have been great if Oregon somehow would have won outright. They ended up pushing on one of the bets and came that close to coming up with a double dip parlay. But, that happens. That's happened a bunch, sitting around, talking about, if, just this happened, it would have been a great weekend. But it was still a good weekend, if you go through and look at the selections and, in particular, the ones I put out there. I haven't been able to say that every week, so it's fun to say. So it gives me a lot more confidence heading in here to week 8. If you're somebody that's joining us for the first time, welcome in. We're trying to help you along as we make 9 picks of the Michigan State Lions games, and we then bring you a trio of best bets, and we also have a prop and a parlay. So we put a lot into it, and we start out with the local games. And look, it's very easy to kill 2 birds with 1 stone because Michigan and Michigan State are playing one another. 24 Michigan is favored by the last line I looked at. How do you see this game playing out tomorrow night in East Lansing?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting game. It's always interesting when these two play each other. A lot of weird stuff tends to happen. There's always some lucky bounces one way or another. But generally, I believe the better team usually wins this game. The bet I'd recommend for this one is the Michigan team total over 34.5. Michigan's top 10 in scoring offense, both on a per play basis, they're actually number 1. And adjusted when you take into opponents and adjusted stuff for that, and then efficiency on a per down basis and scoring as well. Factor all that in, and they're actually number 1 in the country on offense, which is pretty crazy. But they go at it's the second to slowest, I believe, pace in FBS. So they don't run very many plays at all. But the ones that they do run are incredibly efficient. Like I said, number 1 in the country, actually in a couple of those metrics. And then Michigan State's defense on the other side, 59th nationally in scoring defense, not terrible, also not great. Since they started playing Power 5 offenses, though, they've given up 41 to Washington, which is basically at halftime. And then Washington kind of quit trying. 31 to Maryland, 26 to Iowa, and then 27 to Rutgers. So you kind of factor all that in. Michigan's top 10 offense on the other side. I think the most similar opponent in terms of offenses that Michigan State's faced this year is Washington. So I think Michigan will be up around 40 points in this game. I really don't see Michigan State getting that many stops. I think the Tuttle incident from last year, maybe they're a little ticked off from the current investigation going on. I think Michigan and Harbaugh will keep the foot down, keep trying to score when they have the ball. So I really like that team total over 34.5, excuse me. That is my official recommendation for this.
Well, everything you say makes sense. I think this one's going to be a close one at the half. I have Michigan being up at the break 14-9, but then I think they'll really pour it on in the third quarter, and I could see them getting to over 34, but I have picked it right at 34 for Michigan, 34-9. That would be a heartbreaker for you, but I hope they score more than that to cover your bet, but I don't need to have it as a bullseye selection. I do have Michigan covering that 24 points, though, and I just think it's going to be close in the first half before Michigan really gets it going. 34-9 is my selection. Blank thinks that Michigan is going to put it on him. JP has removed his heart monitor. That's good, although he's going to keep it on for another week. With Michigan playing Michigan State. And it'll be interesting to see if there is any reference made. Michigan had some free Harbaugh things on. Will they come out with some words to the NCAA or something like that? Maybe, that's one part of it that I didn't think of. We'll have to see what happens there. All right, that takes care of 2 of our picks, 7 to go. Let's pick a pro game. The Detroit Lions, they have been very good this year. They were very good their last time out, and now they are headed to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. The Ravens are favored by 3. I'm going to pick this game. The Lions, the way they're playing, they are definitely in consideration where you can think about them being the number 1 seed in the NFC. I know San Francisco and Philly are there, but when you get to a record 5-1, you at least put yourself in consideration. I think that the Lions, after this game, are going to rip off 8 in a row. So I only think they're going to lose 3 games this year if I have to, adjust where I'm at right now. But I think this game right here, I have Baltimore 24 and Detroit 20. But after this game, there's a real clear sailing. I can say a huge streak for the Lions winning 8 in a row after this one. Hell, if they win this one, I feel like you start talking about the 1 seed. We're already talking about it. You feel like, man, they got a real shot at the 1 seed. But I think this one, are they going to go 15-1, 16-1? 15-2, 14-3, I think, with this one being the likely loss. I've got the Ravens 24, Lions 20.
I'm with you. Couple reasons why. The Ravens defense been really good this year. Although they are a little bit banged up this week, I've been seeing the practice reports. But then the Lions offense is also banged up. The ground game in particular, going to be missing at least 1 offensive lineman, possibly 2. David Montgomery not going to play. Sounds like he's going to play. He's going to be back, but he's coming off an injury as well. So how good is he going to feel? Will he be 100%? Not really clear there. So that's going to put a lot of pressure on Jared Goff on the road against a really good defense. If you've seen Jared Goff's home road splits, they're significantly worse when they leave Detroit and play on the road. So I'll take the Ravens. I actually had the exact same score written down as you, 24-20. So we are in total agreement on that one.
Well, we were in almost lockstep last week. Let's see what happens now that we get into the best bets and locks. And best bets is where at least the portion of this show where I have done my best work, and I'm picking 3 games, probably the 3 biggest games tomorrow. So we'll see how we do with that. But I'm going to start with a game in Columbus with the Buckeyes laying 4.5. You look at a lot of this, the history and a lot of the different numbers. I think Penn State can pressure Kyle McCord, and I think Penn State, they can match up with Ohio State defensively and talent-wise. I almost am ready to tell you that I think Penn State's going to win this game outright because I have in the parlay, my upset parlay, a little teaser for that. I do have them, but I will take the 4.5 here, thinking that Penn State can keep this game close. I wouldn't be surprised if they win it. That is one of my best bets, the Nittany Lions plus the 4.5. Tennessee is going down to Tuscaloosa to take on Alabama. Remember Tennessee winning that game last year, marching the goalpost down to the Tennessee River, throwing it in, one of the great sights in college football history. And this time around, I think the revenge factor, both of these teams, they're not offensive juggernauts. They're like defensive stalwarts this time. But I think Tennessee's defense is pretty good. Alabama's is better. And when I was looking at this, I thought it should have been a double-digit line with the Crimson Tide favored. Meanwhile, it's 8.5. So I am compelled to take Alabama minus 8.5 against Tennessee. I think this is going to be a good game, though. The other best bet I'm going to is a team that pushed for me last week. They should have won this game, and they didn't. It is Oregon. They are taking on Washington State. They're hosting them, which is a big deal. But, man, Dan Lanning, balls to the wall, go for it every time. You're betting on them and want to cover a spread. Not a bad way to go, although I would have kicked a field goal before half last week, and I would have punted late in that game. But, hey, that's the way Lanning is, that's the way he rolls. I don't mind it. I'm going to bet him this week, and I'm going to lay the 20 points. I'll take Oregon minus 20, Bama minus 8.5, and Penn State plus 4.5. What about your best bets?
I will start with probably the grossest game of the weekend, arguably. So I took the Michigan team total 34.5 earlier, and the total for this game is 30.5. It is Iowa, Minnesota. I am taking the over 30.5 in Iowa and Minnesota. This game, it's going to be gross. I know that it's going to be a good defensive game. If you like defense, watch this game. It'll be a good defensive game. But this total is just too low, 30.5. It's just crazy. This is kind of just a principal play for me. Like a 17-14 score, which is like very much in line for what could happen in this game, gets me to that 31 points that I need to hit this bet. Then you kind of look at the teams. Minnesota's actually been pretty good at running the football this year. Had a couple good running backs pop off for big games against different teams. Iowa in the last couple of weeks gotten better at running the football as well. They're starting to hit more explosive plays in the run game. Not necessarily getting that consistent yardage that you kind of want to see from a good offense, good offensive line, good rushing attack. But I think their O-line is genuinely starting to gel. They're starting to hit a couple of those big plays. Another thing, like Iowa's defense, they're always a threat to score, either defense or special teams. I think that's very much in play against a guy like Ethan Kaliak-Manis, who's sort of pension. If you watch the Michigan game, he turned the ball over 2 pick sixes in that one. I think there's a chance of that happening as well in this game, just because of how good Iowa's defense is, and then also the quarterback kind of struggling to lock onto receivers at times. I have this one projected as a 21-17 Iowa win. So I will take that over 30.5 there. And then I will go to Duke, Florida State. I'm going to take the Blue Devils plus the 14.5. Riley Leonard is one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch probably in the country. Like if I was making a short list, like say JJ leaves after this year, and you're kind of looking around the country of like what quarterback would you want to transfer to Michigan? Like Riley Leonard for me is one of the ones who would be at the top of the list. I really like him. I like his game. He's good, accurate, smart quarterback. He has mobility. He has got good feet. He can run to kind of change the defense and give them fits. And then this Duke defense, I really like them as well. They play really good, technically sound defense. They're almost always in the right position. Florida State's defense, 69th nationally in rushing defense. And Duke with Riley Leonard, and they have a good running back, Jordan Waters, who's been pretty good. Their offensive line isn't great, but you have a good mobile quarterback, kind of helps to ease the running game concerns there. Florida State's not good at stopping the run. It's kind of like I don't think this Florida State team is good enough to go undefeated. I think Florida State will win this game. Wouldn't be shocked if Blue Devils won, but I do think Florida State wins. But I like Duke to cover here for sure. And then I'm going to take on the game in Columbus as well. I'm on the same side as you. I got Penn State plus 4.5. I actually I have my own projections. I have this as a 1-point game in Penn State's favor on a neutral field. So project that it'd be like 2 to Ohio State in Columbus. So a couple points different from the sports book. But basically the reason I say that is I genuinely believe Penn State's the better team in this game. I've watched a lot of these teams. I think going on the road it makes it difficult. That's part of the reasoning of why the spread is where it is. It makes it a lot tougher on the road. But there's a reason the saying is defense travels. Penn State has one of the best defenses in the country. I genuinely believe they'll get pressure on McCord. Ohio State has struggled to run the football against solid defensive lines. Their offensive line is probably the weak point of the Ohio State team. I think Penn State's defense, they're not like the greatest run stuffing defense in the world, but I think as much as Ohio State struggled to run the football this year, even against kind of mediocre defenses, that gives me a lot of confidence in Penn State's ability to be able to contain them on the ground. That'll put pressure on McCord, and it'll force him to make a lot of plays under duress against a good secondary. I just don't think he's going to be able to do that consistently enough for OSU to cover the 4.5 there. Kind of with you. I could see Penn State winning. Don't want to like outright predict it. I like the safe bet here, just taking the points. I think this will be like a 27-24 type of ball game, so I'll take that 4.5.
I like it. I like that you're thinking like I am. Like if you're going with the other side, I don't like it too much. But obviously, since I picked it, I like your reasoning, and I am right there with you. Go Nittany Lions. That's something I say very often. That gets us to our parlay and prop. And the prop, I finally, Donovan Edwards, that's been one of these things, I've picked him multiple times this year to score a touchdown. And then he was able to do it last week, which was a lot of fun to see him get into the end zone. There's a Blake Corum prop. He's crazy, like minus 475 to get a touchdown. So I'm not going to bet that one, but over 92.5 yards. I like that. I actually have the adjusted running total. I get plus 165 if he's over 110. I think he's going to have a huge day, so why not just pour it in? Sure, for me picking up a W, it seems like it'd almost be kind of a cheap W to say over 92.5, because I think that's what he's going to do. I am going to go for the solid W and go plus 165. I think he's going to have a big day, like I said, over 110 yards for Blake Corum tomorrow. And my parlay, that is going to some of the games that I've already talked about here. And I'm going to put it up on the screen that everybody can see. I have both Indiana and Penn State to win outright. If that happens, Penn State's getting 4.5. Indiana is getting 6 points at home, plus 652. You want to get some big time money and get some big time odds, right? Pick some teams to win games outright. That's what I'm doing here with the Hoosiers and Nittany Lions outright plus 652. That is my parlay.
Nice. Who's Indiana playing there in that one? Just curious. Rutgers at home. Okay. I'm not touching either of those games. I'll start with my parlay here. It's had some success for me this year. Didn't do that kind of same strategy talked about in past episodes. I call this one the home cooking parlay. 4 teams, money line for all of them. I'm gonna take Oklahoma to beat UCF. They're like a 20-point favorite. Number one, I really like this Oklahoma team. They're kind of an analytics darling. A lot of the analytics and projections that I've looked at have Oklahoma as like the number 1 team heading into that Texas game. They were kind of right about Oklahoma. They proved to be right in that game. Oklahoma's a really good team. UCF is not. They've kind of struggled, particularly in stopping the run. So it doesn't necessarily feed into Oklahoma's strengths and weaknesses, but I think Oklahoma's just good enough to where they're going to just be able to beat UCF pretty handily. And Vegas does too, because they're a 20-point favorite. Then Bowling Green to beat Akron. I still believe Bowling Green is underrated nationally. I think they're one of the best teams in the MAC. And Akron's one of the worst at all the power ratings and stuff that I look at. So I don't think the Falcons will have too much trouble there with Akron. Missouri to beat South Carolina. Missouri's having kind of a renaissance season, resurgence, whatever word you want to use there. I just think they're a better team than the Gamecocks. They're playing at home here. South Carolina's O-line particularly has really struggled to block much of anybody. The defensive front, Brady Cook, Luther Burden, and the Missouri Tigers offense, they've both been really good so far this year. I think they keep it rolling against the South Carolina defense is kind of overwhelmed. Got a lot of young guys in the secondary. I think that'll show up and be an issue for them in that one. And then Oregon just to beat Washington State. You're taking them to cover. I just need them to win in this one. Washington State got embarrassed last week against Arizona. They're the only reason I didn't hit my parlay last week. They lost like 44-6 despite being the favorite at home to Arizona. Oregon coming back home after the loss against Washington last week. I think it's a good bounce back spot for them here against Washington State team that's kind of reeling on the hands of a big upset loss last week. So I will just take them to win. 4 teams, all at home, all on the money line, adds up to plus 111 the last I looked. So I like that one in the odds there. And then my prop, I'm going to go Omarion Hampton over 86.5 rushing yards. A bit obscure. A lot of people probably don't know who that is. He's North Carolina's running back. In games this year where Oklahoma is favored by 7 points, Hampton has run for at least like 150 yards every game. And they're 21-point favorite, 20-point favorite about in this game. Might not get to that 150 total that he's done a couple times this year already, but they are the heavy favorite. They're going to want to run the ball once they get up, and Hampton's the guy that they're going to do it with once they do get up. He ran for 234 against App State earlier this year and 197 last week against Miami. UVA's defense is 109th in rushing defense. All of it kind of just adds up to an easy over there for Omarion Hampton. I think he'll cross that 100-yard threshold. So I like him to cover that 86.5 fairly easily in that one.
Not bad. We have, for those that are watching, we have the 4-team parlay up on the screen. And there you go. Look to the running back for North Carolina for the props. We both have running backs having big days for our props. Let me ask you a question before we get to our best bets. Dan Lanning, I mentioned his style of coaching, pressing to the wall. You watch a lot of college football. What do you make of going for broke almost every single time, like he did against Washington this past Saturday?
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting research out there about that. I think the analytics, if you're Dan Lanning and you're just looking at the numbers on like a strictly numbers basis every single time, I think the decisions he makes most of the time do align with what the numbers suggest you to do. But I also think like on the other side, there's kind of a psychological factor of your team. Is if you go for a couple and you don't get it, and you're telling your team you're going to go for a third, like how much confidence does your team and your offense have that you're going to be able to pick up the third, fourth down after you miss the first two? So I just think like I get it on one side because the numbers say to do it. That's kind of an easy cop out in my opinion. I think he gets a little too aggressive at times. The Chargers in years past, Brandon Staley's kind of had a penchant for doing that as well. Kind of had similar issues with being a little over aggressive and just following the numbers all the time. I think if you're a good head coach, you factor in the numbers and kind of like the circumstances and confidence, those sorts of things of how your team is playing. And it's not just a numbers game, and it shouldn't be just a feel type thing. I think the best coaches will combine the two and come to a good decision. So I don't know. I mean, he's a little too aggressive for my liking. I think particularly the one at the end of the first half where he had like a fourth and goal, and they were down seven or I think it was 7 or 4 at the time. They were down. It was close, within the
Or
score.
yeah,
But so he talked about it a little bit, I think, in one of the interviews. And one of the mistakes I think he's making is if you just look at the numbers, they might tell you to go for it. But part of the reason that the numbers tell you to go for it there is one of the big payoffs of even if you go for it in that situation on the fourth and goal and don't get it, one of the payoffs is the offense that's taking the field next, like the other team, is going to be so far backed up that it actually like you're still favored. Even it kind of makes sense. Even if you don't get it, you are still the more likely team to score next because that offense is so far backed up. Like statistically speaking, they're very unlikely to be the next team to score because by the time they're so backed up, like your defense has an advantage. And the most likely situations they're going to force a punt, and then you're going to get the ball at like midfield again. But at the end of a half situation like that, that whole aspect of why the numbers suggest going for it in that situation is kind of taken off the table. So it just doesn't really make sense to me. I would have taken the points there. That was really the main one that I had issues with that Dan Lanning did in that game. All the rest of them I thought were fine and like made sense. I probably would have done the same thing to be honest with you. But that one right before halftime I think was the big killer, and they ended up losing. A close game at the end. So it was like if you would have just taken the points, I think it changes the entire complexion of that second half. So
yeah.
yeah, so long answer, but I think he takes it a little bit too far, I guess, is the short summary version.
Yeah, I hear you. You're talking about getting the benefit of having him pinned all the way back there if you don't make it. That seems like a huge deal, and you don't get that if you're going for it. And if you believe in momentum, I don't think the numbers take into account momentum. They always
don't. There's no way to quantify it. So
something going here and feeling good going into half, and they could have done that with a chip shot field goal. I complained and I said I would punt at the end. I probably would. I mean, you complete the pass, the game's over, and so you feel pretty good about that. And the way Penix is rolling, if he's got to go 40, he can easily go 70. So I understand that. Even though I think at one point you got to say, hey, can you rely on your defense at all? But it made for an interesting watch right from the get-go when you're going for 2 points when you score the first touchdown. It's like, hey, we really got it going. Mm-hmm. But what if you don't make the 2-point conversion? It almost feels like you're giving momentum back to the other team, but he kept doing it, so it was wild to watch. All right, we've got best bets here, and I'm going to the game. I already tipped it off a little bit because I have in the lock of the week IU taking down Rutgers. I have IU in my parlay winning outright. And same thing with Penn State in that parlay. But I'll take the 6 points in the lock of the week to get that W. So give me Indiana at home against Rutgers. Rutgers is all right. Indiana is all right. And Indiana's at home. That's my line of thinking here. And that's why I'm going to take the Hoosiers plus the 6 for my lock of the week.
I'm taking another game. Arkansas, Mississippi State. A lot of people probably don't watch these two teams, but I really like this Arkansas team. I liked them a decent amount preseason. They had a bunch of injuries early on in the year, so they've kind of struggled out of the bat. But they're playing at home here in this one. They're coming off their best game of the year last week. They're just, like I mentioned, they're just starting to get healthy. Mississippi State on the other side, debatably the worst team in the SEC. I have them as like a 2-point favorite over Vanderbilt right now, which is, it's not good company to be in if you're talking about where you're at in the SEC. If your closest comparison team is Vanderbilt, one of the worst teams in the SEC there. I really believe the Razorbacks are going to control this game. KJ Jefferson is a good veteran quarterback playing at home. They're starting to get hot. Don't think they're necessarily going to blow them out, but I do think they win this one rather easily. I will lay that 6.5 as my lock of the week.
There it is, Arkansas, and I will put that on the Den for your lock of the week. In fact, I'm going to try to write that down. All right, Lucas, always great to hear your opinion on these games, and I'm going to take it to the bank. Appreciate it. We'll talk with you next week. Enjoy the games this weekend.
Absolutely. Go Nittany Lions.
Yeah, I don't say that very often. Go Lions.